Azure File Sync is a service that helps you centralize your organization's file share in Azure Files while keeping the flexibility, performance, and compatibility of an on-premises file server. Azure File Sync transforms Windows Server into a quick cache of your Azure file share. You can use any protocol that's available on Windows Server to access your data locally, including SMB, NFS, and FTPS. And you can have as many caches as you need across the world. There are many use cases and advantages to Azure File Sync that will help you to save time and money. The first one is lift and shift, where you can move your applications that require access between Azure and on-premises systems. This will provide right access to the same data across Windows servers and Azure files. This lets companies with multiple offices have a need to share files with all sites. Next is branch offices, where there is a need to back up files or you need to set up a new server that will connect to Azure Storage. Once File Sync is implemented, Azure Backup will back up your on-premises data. Also, you can restore file metadata immediately and recall data as needed for rapid disaster recovery. And then file archiving, so only recently accessed data is located on local servers and non-used data moved to Azure in what is called cloud tiering. Cloud tiering is an optional feature of Azure File Sync in which frequently accessed files are cached locally on the server, while all other files are tiered to Azure Files based on policy settings. When a file is tiered, the Azure File Sync file system replaces the file locally with a pointer or reverse point. The reverse point represents a URL to the file in Azure Files. When a user opens a tiered file, Azure File Sync seamlessly recalls the file data from Azure Files without the user need to know that the file is stored in Azure. Cloud tiering files will have a grade icon with an offline file attribute to let the user know that the file is only in Azure. To gain the most from Azure File Sync, it's important to understand the components and terminology. The Storage Sync service is the top-level Azure resource for Azure File Sync. The Storage Sync service resource is a peer of the storage account resource and can similarly be deployed to Azure resource groups. A distinct top-level resource from the storage account resource is required because the Storage Sync service can create sync relationships with multiple storage accounts via multiple sync groups. A subscription can have multiple Storage Sync service resources deployed. The registered server object represents a trusted relationship between your server or cluster and the Storage Sync service. You can register as many servers to a Storage Sync service instance as you want. However, a server or cluster can be registered with only one Storage Sync service at a time. The Azure File Sync agent is a downloadable package that enables Windows Server to be synced with an Azure file share. A server endpoint represents a specific location on a registered server, such as folder on a server volume. Multiple server endpoints can exist on the same volume if their namespaces do not overlap. For example, I have D accounting and D sales folder. And the sync group defines the sync topology for a set of files. Server endpoints with a sync group are kept in sync with each other. If, for example, you have two distinct sets of files that you want to manage with Azure File Sync, you would create two sync groups and add different endpoints to each sync group. A Storage Sync service can host as many sync groups as you need. The last component is the Cloud Endpoint. A Cloud Endpoint is an Azure file share that is part of a sync group. The entire Azure file share syncs, and an Azure file share can be a member of only one Cloud Endpoint. So an Azure file share can be a member of only one sync group. I know Azure File Sync will save you a lot of time.